Countdown to Halloween 2023, featuring eerie and uncanny tales of haunts, ghosts, and suspense. October is finally here. Join us all month for special Halloween presentations on Storylink Radio's YouTube channel as we count down to Halloween 2023. Keep a close eye on YouTube alerts or you'll miss one. Celebrate October with us right here and now. Tonight's presentation from Storylink Radio. Homecoming. The call of an owl woke Timothy. It took a long time for him to draw himself from sleep. When he did, he was groggy and confused. He licked his lips. They were dry. His tongue felt thick and clumsy. He blinked at the darkness around him. Why was it so cold? He reached for the blankets to pull them around his shoulders, but all he managed to grasp was a handful of dry, crackling leaves. With great effort, Timothy sat up and looked around. It was easy to see that he wasn't home in bed. He had been lying on the cold, hard ground. Wind-blown leaves were scattered across his bare legs and feet, and a few had lodged themselves in the tatters of his clothes and the tangles of his uncombed hair. His hair. Why was his hair so long? And why was it so cold for a summer night? "Where am I?" he said aloud. And the sound of his own voice startled him, and he felt the first pangs of fear crawl up his spine. "Ooh, ooh, ooh, ooh." The hoot of an owl that had awakened him made him jump, and he twisted around to find where it was coming from. Low in the branches of a nearby tree, a pair of round eyes glowed in the moonlight. It called again. Then another glint of light caught Timothy's attention. Painfully he stood and he shuffled towards it. His legs were stiff, and he felt the cold down to his bones. He tried to move quietly, afraid of what might be waiting on the other side of the branches. Finally, he pushed aside a scraggly twig and stepped into the open. Stretched in front of him were the dark waters of a lake. A wide, rippling ribbon of moonlight cut across the center of it. Timothy could hear the water lapping gently on the shore, and a light, chilly breeze stirred the leaves in the ground around him. It also stirred a memory. "The lake," he said to himself. We were playing. Sandy? Where are you? Sandy?" Sandy was his cousin. They'd been playing near the water. His mom had asked them to be home before dark. Home. A sharp pang shot through Timothy's heart as he thought of his home and of his room with all the posters of sailboats. That was why he was here. He and Sandy had come to the lake to test out a new model boat they had built. The boat had drifted off. They'd followed it along the shoreline trying to catch up to it, but by the time they had found it, trapped in the tangle of bushes overhanging the water, the setting sun was turning a sky-deep dark red. Timothy could still hear the sound of his mother's voice warning them. "Now don't stay out too late, dears," she had said. "I don't want you walking home in the dark." "Aw, come on, Ma," he grumbled. "What are you worried about? I know my way through the woods, even if it was pitch black." "What did I just say, Timothy?" she had said sternly. "Be home before dark." "Oh, okay," he agreed reluctantly as he ran outside to meet Sandy. "And take an apple with you." He remembered his mom calling after him. "You'll get hungry out there." His mother was right. Timothy was hungry. Very hungry. But it wasn't an apple that he wanted. It was something else. Something he couldn't quite think of. His mother had also been right about how dangerous it was to stay out after dark. Somehow Timothy had gotten lost. And Sandy? Where was Sandy? Timothy recalled standing on the lake shore with her as the sun sank below the horizon. "It's getting dark fast," he had said. "We'll get home faster if we cut through the woods," he had said. Sandy had shaken her head. "No, Timmy, I really don't want to. It's too creepy." "You're such a scaredy cat," he'd made fun of her. They'd been close for as long as he could remember. When Sandy's parents were killed in a car accident, she had come to live with Timothy and his parents. They were a lot alike, except for, well, one thing. He didn't really mind the dark, and Sandy was afraid of it. Really afraid of it. She was certain that ghosts and werewolves and vampires actually existed. Timothy thought of how frightened she had been when they had first headed into the trees. Now he was sorry he had made fun of her, especially since he didn't know where she was. "Oh, somebody must be looking for us," he whispered to no one. He looked up and down at the moonlit shoreline. "They're probably looking in the woods. I'll just cut through and head home. They've probably found Sandy. Now they'll find me." He babbled on and on to himself as he rambled toward the trees, their leafless branches forming dark tangle of shadows. He walked into the dense forest. The echo of his footsteps made it sound as though there were things slinking through the woods. The wind softly rocked the bare branches above and seemed to whisper a warning, "Go back, go back." But Timothy forced himself on. Some buried thought kept nagging at him, but all he could think about was how cold he was and how very, very hungry. Maybe Sandy was nearby, all alone and frightened. He stopped and called her name. A rustling noise came from somewhere in the dark behind him. Was it her? He strained to hear, but again there was only silence. Then out of one corner of his eye, Timothy caught a glimpse of a pale glimmer. He snapped his gaze to a clump of trees just ahead, and a memory stirred. That was where they had first seen the woman. Timothy felt his insides twist in fear as he thought of her. She had been standing in a shadow staring at them. Sandy had noticed her first. "Timmy!" she had cried out. "Look, someone's over there!" Timothy had tried to put on a brave act. Maybe you were right," he had said to Sandy. "Maybe we should go back and walk home along the shore." The woman had moved toward them. As she had stepped from the shadows, Timothy had seen her face and gasped in horror. She was as pale as chalk, but her eyes were gleaming like blood-red coals. Her lips were curled back in a hideous grin. Timothy would never forget the sight of the gleaming fangs that protruded from her mouth. "Run! Run for the lake, Sandy! Run!" he screamed at Sandy, pushing her ahead of him. Timothy remembered racing through the woods in terror. He could still feel his heart pumping, the bushes scratching at his legs. He could still feel himself tumbling as his foot caught on a fallen branch. He had landed hard and had the wind knocked out of him. The last thing he remembered was watching Sandy running away, and for a moment he was angry at her for leaving him. For just a split second, Timothy wanted to pay her back for leaving him alone in this horrible forest of tall, scary trees. "The trees," Timothy gasped. "The trees." He looked up in realization. The summer leaves were gone. Why hadn't he noticed that before? And how long had he been out here? He began to run. Was that horrible woman still out here too? He had to get home. He was so cold and terribly hungry. In the shadows, they crouched on every side as though they cloaked some secret horror. Timothy forced his feet to move. From all directions he could hear the rustling of dry leaves stirred by the cold wind. He imagined blood-red eyes watching his every step. He was not alone. He could sense it. Suddenly he burst from the forest into a clearing. Down the hill and to his right he could see the lake again. It was a dark tongue of water with light glittering at its tip. The lights of town and home. Timothy stumbled down the slope, but as he neared the familiar place he felt a growing sense of dread. Without knowing why, he stayed in the shadows. He was becoming more at ease in the dark now, and the cold no longer bothered him. When he turned onto his own street, he noticed that the houses were strung with colored lights. It was a holiday of some sort, but that didn't seem important. All that was important was the gnawing hunger that was growing inside of him with each passing moment. There were no colored lights at his own house. There was a warm glow coming from the front window. Someone was home, at least. Timothy no longer felt any fear. He moved quietly toward the window and peered in. The light hurt his eyes. Sandy, his cousin Sandy, was at the edge of the couch near the fireplace, her head resting on a pillow. Her eyes were closed and a book lay in her lap. For a moment, as Timothy stared at her in the window at her, he again felt a moment of anger. But the feeling was soon replaced by hunger. He had to eat. Soon. He slipped his thin, pale fingers under the window and pushed. And it slid up easily. And then soundlessly, he pulled himself up to the ledge and eased over the windowsill. The room felt hot and stuffy. He wanted to escape into the safety of the cool night. That horrible gnawing in his stomach was relentless. He needed something to eat. Leaving a trail of dry dirt and leaves, he scraped across the floor to stand behind his cousin. A lock of her hair was draped across her neck, and he gently pushed it away. Her eyes fluttered open. "Sandy," he moaned hoarsely, "I'm home." Sandy's eyes widened in terror. "No! Oh, no! No! You can't be! You're... Her eyes rolled up and she became limp. Timothy gripped her neck in his chalk-white fingers. It was so warm and he was so hungry. He drew back his lips and he ran his tongue over his sharp teeth. "It's good to be back, cousin," he snarled. Then scanning across the room, Timothy noticed a photograph of himself. The frame was draped in black with an inscription that read, "In loving memory of Timothy." He smiled slightly, touched by the sentiment. "You'll have to forgive me if I eat and run." He bared his fangs and sank them into his cousin's neck. Outside the window, a woman with blood-red eyes watched. "Very good, my new little friend," she whispered. "Very good." You've just heard tonight's story from Storylink Radio's Countdown to Halloween 2023. Remember to come back for our next tale. Many more stories of all genres available to listen to and read along with now on our website at www.storylinkradio.com. Visit our YouTube channel at youtube.com/storylinkradio. And visit our podcast for easy mobile listening anywhere, anytime. Just search for Storylink Radio on your favorite podcast provider. Oh, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button and click that alert bell for Storylink Radio.